Hello, Devlin here with you, and welcome to another edition of Devlin's Pirate Radio Show. How are you doing today? I just thought I'd ask. I'm usually always talking about myself. I thought, I appreciate that you take the time to listen to me, so I thought I'd ask how you're doing today. Then I left a little bit of space, but really can't keep too much blank space, so I'm going to have to do a show here at some point. But I do think about you guys, so, let me know how you guys are doing. A little bit of silliness today. Anyhow, we got some great topics to talk about today. First, I just want to say thank you to all you people who listen and take the time. It means a lot to me. I wish I could see everybody who listens, because it's amazing. But I bump into people all the time who are telling me, oh, I've been keeping up with your podcasting, and it's so nice to hear. But, it would be nice to know how many of you do. I always joke about the 17 listeners. I think we're at least up to maybe 19 now. So, but who knows? Could be a lot more. Because as I said, every time I see somebody, they say, hey, I love your podcast. Another thing I love is I'm starting to get a lot of feedback on people who really want to come co-host this. For me, that tells me I put on a pretty good show if you want to actually sit here, because I think if I did an embarrassing show, people wouldn't want to come. But I'm starting to, I can always tell when the conversation's veering to the, I wouldn't mind coming on and, sharing some stuff. And, you know what? Enthusiasm is your best way to get on, because I love having people on who really want to come on. And, I'm open to anyone really coming on. I find everybody has an interesting story. And there's always something people can talk about. So thank you for thing. And don't be shy about it. If you come out blatantly and say, I want to be on your show, ask Doug Miller. He did that, and he was the first co-host I had. So don't be shy. I really love hearing that. Okay, enough talk. That's enough of that. Let's get to our first topic. I'm actually getting out of my comfort zone for this one, because I don't usually talk about current events or things in the news. But, as I said, in this show, I'll talk about just about anything. And that's exactly what I'm going to do today. So it's good getting out of your comfort zone every once in a while. But two big stories have dropped in the last few months that have really affected the gay community, and people have asked my opinions about them. And I wasn't sure if I was going to share them on my podcast or not, but I thought, you know what? One, why not? Gives me something to talk about. And two, I've got a feeling if I don't talk about these at some point that I might lose my my card to be in the gay community. Yes, there is a very tight club that we pay our dues, and, you've heard of the gay mafia, but okay, I'm just being jokey. Don't be freaking out too much. But anyhow, no, honestly, two big events have come out, and I wanted to touch upon them both for people who are interested in my opinion. And again, this is just my opinion. Of course, we've got Caitlyn Jenner, who has become the woman she always was. And then, of course, the American bill that passed the legalization of same-sex marriage. And now, in America, gay people can get married. And we've had this in Canada since 2005, but, they just passed it June 26th this year. So, I'm going to talk about both of them. And I'll start with I think the bigger one, obviously, is the states finally doing this. I believe I read they were the 21st country to do this. And, of course, America being one of the biggest populated, this is a huge deal. And I remember that it's been trying to be passed for many times and hasn't. So when it actually was announced, and the fact that it was actually announced at the end of Pride Month was quite nice. Now, I won't get into Pride, my opinion on Pride, because my Pride, as you all know from past shows, is everybody. I want everybody to celebrate Pride. I don't care who you are. But this is a big deal, and it is worth celebrating. And, it's a big deal when any country, every country that says it's okay, it's a big deal. It doesn't matter how big or small the country is. Of course, this made major news because the U.S. is, come on, it's a juggernaut. But, as I said, to me, I'm excited when I even hear smaller countries come out. So, yes, when this came out, I was ecstatic. This isn't just a few steps forward. This is a huge leap. These are leaps and bounds we're moving in. Yes, we have a long way to go. But, you know what? I think Elton John said it best, that he said, this isn't just about, same-sex couples marrying. This is about, integrity. This is about tolerance. This is about being seen as humans. Because, people were like, how come you're not just, going absolutely nuts, putting it on your Facebook, changing your picture to, rainbow colors and stuff. And I said, well, I am happy. I'm so happy about this. But I think it's different when you are part of the community that has made the things. Yes, you're celebrating because this is something you've wanted. But at the same time, you still have to wake up in the morning and deal with other things that haven't changed. So I am not saying in any way I'm belittling this. It's just like, okay, but it affects my life only a little bit. I think it's great that people can marry. You guys know my opinions on marriage. It's not for Mike and I. We've had lots of people. I remember we still get all the time, how come you aren't married? And we get it a lot more since this bill has been passed. And I'm thinking, well, technically we could have got married from the first, since 2005, but we just don't believe in marriage. That's just our thing. Like, I'm not saying I don't believe in the concept of marriage, like for other people, but nobody's going to tell me a little piece of paper is going to tell me that my relationship is stronger than yours just because you were in a church or you got the government to sign a paper. To me, that's ridiculous. I've also known couples that have basically gotten married. They dated and lived together for, decades, and then they finally decided to get married, and it all went to putt. But that's it. But we constantly get that. Oh, you two should get married now. It's not ever going to happen. I'm telling you that right now. It's just not our thing. I would love to do a whole segment on why I don't like weddings in general. But not sure I'm ready to cross that line yet, because I've been to a lot of weddings, and many could be listeners, and I have weddings to come, and they could be listeners. But you know what? One day I might just have a breakdown and say, fuck it. This is my opinion. But anyhow, I'm very happy about this, and I agree with Elton. This is basically another step forward in us being recognized as people. We shouldn't have to fight to be in love and want to be union. Be in a union and a committed relationship. So, yeah, this is big for anyone, and it's a big step, And so that is, great. I did get a little bit criticized because of the fact that after this hit, Facebook looked like a bloody rainbow because everybody was changing their profile pics to this rainbow thing. Now, I thanked people for doing that because it was amazing to, start the morning and seeing all these people supporting us and stuff. But sadly with Facebook, sometimes people can read it as sarcasm. Now, I basically didn't change my profile pic because I had been celebrating Pride. I'd been putting up Pride videos, Pride short films, I've had Pride pictures up, I had me in bloody makeup and stuff. But a lot of people are like, why didn't you do the profile picture? What's that all about, and why did you thank us sarcastically? Well, sometimes in Facebook you can't tell sarcasm from being genuine. I was actually being genuine. I just don't jump on bandwagons when it happens. And I just made a comment that it would have been nice. June was Pride Month. The week before they passed it was Hamilton Pride. It would have been nice to decorate our things just for that. Not just for America saying it's okay. But once again, America gives the thumbs up and hey, that means it's all right. I'm just saying that we could have been celebrating this all together earlier in the month. And I don't jump on bandwagons. I don't do anything that says, share if you agree. And I don't do anything that tells me, oh, we should all put this in our profile picture or this in our status. It's just not me. But anyhow, I'm very enthusiastic about this. It's a huge step. And let's hope this inspires more countries to do this. Caitlyn Jenner coming out was huge news. And I have to say that I think she's absolutely beautiful. I think those Vanity Fair pictures were incredible. I think she looks lovely. And I think the biggest beauty was that she now gets to be the person she always thought she would be. That being said, it's a little difficult for me at first, and it'll be something I get used to. But you got to remember, for many, before she became Caitlyn Jenner, she was Bruce Jenner. And there's a generation that knows Bruce Jenner only as the stepfather of the Kardashian girls. For me, I grew up in the 70s, so I know Bruce Jenner as the, I'm not a big sports fan, but I even know that Bruce Jenner was an amazing athlete and decathlon winner from the 1976 Olympics. He was everywhere, such a handsome man. He'd do a lot of TV personalities and was one of the stars of the incredibly but beautifully bad movies Can't Stop the Music, starring the Village People and Steve Guttenberg. Anyhow, so yeah, it's a little hard. It's kind of like when Chaz Bono went through his transition, because I grew up with Bruce Jenner. Now, that's not saying I'm not accepting of it. I totally am. I think everybody should be who they want to be. But it is hard. It'll take me a while to get used to. But honestly, I think the pictures were absolutely beautiful. I think it's an amazing step. I like that a good chunk of her family is supportive. And that is amazing. I know a few trans people in my life, and they're going through different phases of, some are just, living the gender they want to be. Some are actually going, I believe it's called getting their T-shots, to go further with the treatment. And I give them credit. We always tell people to be who they are. And that's the way it should be. I've always said, I personally think you should be the best person you can be, rather than just be yourself. But, I have lots of respect for trans, and I understand it must be very difficult for them. And, now, I do believe, and I might get a little controversy in this, I do believe there are some trans out there that just don't like certain aspects of their gender that they were born. Their born gender, not the ones they believe they are, or they are. Not believe, they are. And I think they say they're trans, but then they basically take the best of both worlds. And I think they just avoid because they don't want to do certain things of that gender, and so they just kind of do that. And that's fine. We live in a world where you basically can be whoever you want to be. So if you are, you want to say you're trans, but you can really see that you kind of play both sides. I'm not a fan of that. I think you kind of got to go all way or nothing, but that's just me. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying, for me, I don't like that you can just pick and choose, because if that's the case, then I should just say that there's a lot of parts of being a woman that I would like in my life. And that might sound a little crazy, but yeah, no. There are lots of things that I totally love about being a woman, so maybe, I'll just, take a bit. But see, for me, it's just, you know who you are. So when Caitlyn came out, I thought, well, first of all, she was beautiful. But the thing I don't like is all I have heard since she has become herself is she's talked about how awesome it is to get her makeup done professionally now, and being able to go out and buy clothes out in public and stuff like this, and about the fact that she has a new reality show which will show her transition and how she deals with stuff in life. Okay, that's all well and good, and that's great. But you are now, I would say, probably one of the most prolific, you're out there, a woman. You have had this amazing journey. You came to be yourself late in life, and I think it makes it even difficult, because I see young people doing it, and I think it is a little easier when you're young, but when people have known you all their lives, and then suddenly, I've always been a woman. But now I'd like to hear more about her inside feelings, the journey she's had, because all I've been hearing about is superficial stuff about beauty and the outfits she gets to wear now and this. And to promote a reality show, I'm sorry, I can't really take that serious. Now, the show may have aspects that show this, but if it turns out to be just a fashion show and seeing her cry because she has a difficult thing, I want to hear the story that got her there. And now she has an opportunity. She has a voice, and she needs to use it, because there are a lot of people out there that don't have the same chances of becoming who they are. And if she can inspire one person, I'm all about if you can inspire one person, of course, it'd be awesome if you can inspire a lot. But even if it's just one person in your lifetime, then I think you need to take a chance on that. So what I want to see from Caitlyn in the next little while is her to start using her journey, her position as a new woman to the world, but obviously a woman that she's always been to herself. I want to see her using that and talking about that, because she could maybe inspire somebody who is out there who may be not ready to come out, but one day will. And they need to hear the good, the bad, the ugly about why to do this. Because usually when you finally take that step, it is a positive one. So I'm very happy for Caitlyn Jenner. I think she looks amazing. But now I want to see her use it, and not just to promote another reality show with the Kardashians. Okay, that's me. That's as political as I get around here, and that's why I'm going to be nostalgic for the next two segments. I'm going to take you to the movies, and we are going to celebrate the birthday of a movie that, or I guess it's not a birthday, but it's an anniversary for a movie that turns 40. And for some of you who have been around that long, you might feel a little old. I certainly will be with you, so you're not alone. Anyhow, we're going to take a look at that film when we come back. Welcome back, and you are listening to Devlin's Pirate Radio Show. We're now going to pay tribute to one of the greatest movies of all time. It actually turns 40 this summer. That will take you back to 1975, and this movie just filled theaters in that summer. And why not? Nobody was going to the beach because they were scared shitless, all because of this film. It's a little movie called Jaws. Jaws is an amazing film, and there's always anniversaries of movies, but I really wanted to celebrate this one because Jaws still stands up to the test of time. Of course, it was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it was based on a Peter Benchley novel. It starred Roy Scheider, it starred Richard Dreyfuss, and Robert Shaw, just to name a few. And, of course, the movie was about a small town, Amity, it's a tourist town, and their summer is a big deal, especially the 4th of July weekend. And this summer things go kind of a little weird when a giant shark, great white shark, attacks, and they have no choice but to close the beach. But the mayor, of course, of the town desperately wants to get rid of this shark so they can open it, because that's where all their tourist money is. that's a quick synopsis. Most of you probably have seen it, and if you haven't, I highly recommend you checking it out. If you have Blu-ray, they released a Blu-ray edition that I consider one of the best Blu-rays ever, due to the fact that they remastered the hell out of it, and some scenes I have never seen this good in a long time. Now, I was 7 years old when Jaws first came out. Seven, yeah, in that realm. And basically, I remember we had just moved to Hamilton, and there was a lot of posters for it promoting it. And of course, one of the most iconic posters. But I was really naive. And even though on the poster there's blatantly a shark with massive teeth, I actually thought it was about a dolphin. And I told my brother I really wanted to check it out. And he said, yeah, that's not going to happen. Although other 7-year-olds probably got to go see it, I didn't, because I was afraid of everything. And they knew I would not only not go to the beach, but I would not probably swim in a swimming pool or go in a waterbed for, if I saw it that young. So I got to see it, like many people my age, when it came on TV in 1979 on the ABC Sunday Night Movie. And even though it was edited, I still was jumping in fear. It's a movie I watch pretty much once a year. And I do like to show it to people who haven't seen it. And I love watching them because there's certain jumps. I think the biggest jump in the movie is probably... No, spoiler here if you haven't seen it, but there's something that happens in a boat that doesn't really involve the shark. It involves a body part that they find. And I think it's probably... I know people told me that when that scene happened in theaters, you could see popcorn literally flying. And as a kid, I remember just jumping and couldn't believe my eyes. And I had a friend a couple of years back that had never seen Jaws, and I showed it to him, and I always kind of had my eye on him when the scene happened, because I wanted to see if this old movie could still make them jump, and it definitely did. He just like, oh, whoa, and it's lovely to see that a movie can hold up. So that's my experience with Jaws. I never saw it on the big screen. But it still holds its bite, pardon the expression. Everything about this movie is incredible. And I want to talk not only about, I talked about my experiences with it, but I also want to talk about some of the fun facts. Because this movie is a movie, I can watch documentary after documentary about this, because this movie is so fascinating. And I would want to talk about why it's considered such an important film. It was one of Steven Spielberg's first. He had done a couple of other ones. He did a TV movie called Duel. He did Sugarland Express. But when he got a hold of Jaws, he was actually not sure he wanted to do it. He was a young filmmaker, and after doing Duel on TV, which was kind of a thriller with a truck, he really didn't know if he wanted to go down the thriller path again. Now, this movie was made for very little, but nowadays probably would have cost a heck of a lot more. But this movie did go over budget, and what was supposed to be something like a 55-day shoot went on to film for 156 days. The movie practically was considered trouble right from the start. And Spielberg really thought he would never work again. And of course, this became the stepping stone to his career. But at the time, he thought, I'm never going to work again because so many problems. They filmed it in Martha's Vineyard, although some of the live shark shots were shot in Australia. But all the ones using the famous mechanical robot, Bruce, were filmed in Martha's Vineyard. And they had a hell of a time with Bruce. They had a hell of a time with weather. They had a hell of a time with everything. Bruce the Mechanical Shark gave them a lot of trouble. They had a couple of them. I think there was only 2 or 3. But anyhow, he wouldn't work sometimes. I think they lost one. He sunk. And just gave them so much trouble to make it look real and stuff. But they persevered, and as I said, they went over budget. Now, when I say over budget, I want to say something like $8 million or something like that. which nowadays you can barely make a cheap movie for $8 million, you know. You might be able to do like one of those small little found footage horror things or something. But they did it, but that even was bad for Universal because that it was already way over budget. They wanted it a lot cheaper. But it wasn't happening. Spielberg, I just recently read that Spielberg actually wanted to go back. He didn't feel the movie was scary enough, and he wanted to go back to film that scene I was talking about with the body part, and basically they wouldn't even give him the money for that, so he actually used $3,000 out of his own pocket, used a swimming pool, used some powdered milk in order to make the water look murky to film what is probably one of the scariest moments in the thing. But the Universal was just so pissed off that they had already spent all this money, but Spielberg felt he needed it. I've also found out that another thing they changed was one of the best lines from the movie, we need a bigger boat, when they first finally see the shark after, you know, because you don't see the shark at the beginning of the film. You know, and they did that on purpose. They wanted the shark, even though everybody knew what the shark looked like, they saw him on the poster, they didn't want the unveiling of the shark to be thing. And the way they do it is really nice with the way he's introduced. But I guess when they first see the shark, about 30-40 seconds later, Roy Scheider delivers, we need a bigger boat, which is probably the most famous line in Jaws. But apparently audiences reacted so big that they were still screaming at that point that they actually had to hit the volume on that because they were missing the line. So that was pretty cool to say. So anyhow, there were so many production problems, and even though Jaws was a bestseller novel, it wasn't guaranteed. And it eventually made history because of its rigorous campaign. And one of the big reasons why this movie is famous is it's the first big summer blockbuster. And it used a technique to get people into theaters all summer. Back then you didn't have quite as much selection. Like here, every week we have 2-3 movies coming out. Back then you didn't have that. You might have one every week if you're lucky. So you could have movies staying in theaters all summer. And this was the game plan. But this was the first big summer blockbuster. It was also the first movie to gross over $100 million, which again, now you can have like 17 movies gross over 100, you know, in a year. But you don't have that back in 1975. But before that, movies like The Godfather and Sound of Music and Gone with the Wind that were big hits, they were released all over the place, you know, December, March, January. There was no real summer movie season or we got to release this for the Oscars. There was nothing like that back then. So Jaws hit it home, and then a couple of years later, Star Wars verified that we got to release movies in the summer because that's where they're becoming big. And that's why Jaws is not only because it's a great film, and it is, it really is a great film, but it is because it had an aggressive campaign. Peter Benchley, who wrote the book, he was talking about his book on TV shows months before the movie came out. But what Jaws did, which no other people did, was they bought up a lot of TV space and had an aggressive television campaign. So that meant that that they just were really aggressive. 2 nights before the movie came out, they bought basically shows like, you know, The Waltons, Happy Days, you know, just every show they could, you would see an ad for Jaws, Jaws, Jaws. It was in everybody's head. When it opened, it only opened in a couple hundred theaters because there wasn't as many theaters as there is now. Now you see a movie and it drops in 4,000 theaters, so no wonder they can make over $100 million on the first weekend. Back then you didn't have that. It would start at 400, then it would build to 5, and then a couple weeks later it would move to 6. And this television aggressive ad campaign really helped make the movie and sold it. It eventually became a hit all over the world, but Europe didn't see Jaws until December of that year. It came out, around Christmas and stuff. But Jaws kept building, and word of mouth became the big thing. Everybody was like, have you seen Jaws yet? And people would go back and share Jaws with their friends and their family, and they'd have to see it. And that's why back in the day, you meet people who, saw movies like Star Wars or Jaws or stuff like that. I saw it 25 times in the theater, stuff like that, because there wasn't a lot of variety out there. But it was a great movie, so people wanted to go see it. And it really did work, play on terror. Like Psycho, when it came out in the 60s, people didn't want to take showers after that. Beach attendance was down in 1975 because everybody was going to see Jaws or heard about it, and people stayed away from the beach. And that, to me, shows how great a movie it is. Now, there are some shark fans out there that, didn't like the movie because it actually made the shark very aggressive, and it's not what sharks really are. As much as I love Jaws, there's a wonderful movie called Shark Water that tells you really what sharks are about, and I strongly recommend you seeing that too. But Jaws still remains a great film. And everything about Jaws is phenomenal. Not only is it a great movie, but it was the launching pad for Spielberg, who went on to do even more phenomenal films like Close Encounters and E.T. and Schindler's List, and just so many. There's so many to mention, and Jaws was the stepping stone of that. Jaws, of course, also has probably one of the most iconic movie posters. I would say it's probably one of the best, and I just read that the company who had to put that poster together actually had a lot of problems with it. It took about 6 months, and they kept being told by Universal it has to be scarier. Then finally someone said, the only way we're going to get this really scary is if we film the shark from underneath, because of the fact that we can see its teeth. And there you have it. A swimmer at the top and the shark coming up. John Williams, the score is probably one of the most recognizable scores. Just that doo-doo, doo-doo. It's so simplistic, but you don't want to be in a water in here. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. And of course, John Williams eventually worked with Spielberg even more. Gave us, all his friends started using him. He gave us Star Wars, Superman, Indiana Jones, just a ton of great themes. And John Williams says if it wasn't for Jaws, he wouldn't have had that. Because Jaws is considered right up there with all those classic ones I mentioned. And he had only done a couple of things, but he said he's glad that Spielberg trusted him with it because of the fact that it's become such an iconic theme. And everything about Jaws is iconic. And of course, lots of merchandising came out, which was another thing. Even in 75, merchandising for films were not as big as, a thing. Of course, Star Wars took it to new heights. But Jaws was right there with movie adaptions and books based on it. And, the screenplay, I think, came out. The making of it was pretty huge. There were everybody was wearing Jaws shirts and, had Jaws stickers on their bikes. And there was a Jaws game, which I think I've talked about here before, which I absolutely loved, where you had a little hook and you had to pick pieces of garbage out of Jaws' mouth. And then eventually he would snap and bite. Oh, God, do I wish I had that game, because it was just a great game. I admit, I do have I love shark movies, but I used to have shark dreams. They scare the crap out of me. Yet I still watch them because they are great. And I like a lot of them, but none are as awesome as the original Jaws. And if you haven't seen it, or haven't seen it in a long time, I strongly recommend you checking it out again, reliving it. Although there's some 70s reference in it, I still think it stays timely. It fights a fear that everybody has. It might keep you out of water for a little while. But I am glad I got a chance to pay tribute to it. And hey, get out there and check it out again. Anyhow, I'm not leaving the movies for too long. I'm going to tell you some of my tales from the drive-in days. Some of my favorite stories that I had. I wish I got to see Jaws at the drive-in, but I didn't. But I have some other great stories to tell you when we come back.
I call this next segment Tales from the Drive-In Movie Theater.
Okay, they're not that frightening. They're more heartwarming than anything. Maybe a little goofy. All of you know my love of movies and my love of drive-in theaters, and I don't go quite as much as I should. And I really should get out there this summer. And because I love it. I love it so much. I just love the nostalgia of it. It's the worst place on earth to go see movies. I will be honest with you. You can't really see dark scenes. It's so dark. It's just you can't see them, and you try to make them out, and it doesn't work. Sometimes the sound isn't all that great. But you know what? I absolutely love the feel of the drive-in. It's all about the experience more than the movies. I love getting there early. And then just sitting and just enjoying the drive-in vibe and just talking, having the music on in the background lightly before they put, the coming attractions or the old refreshment stand things. I've always been a fan of the drive-in. I started going when I was a kid, and I just wanted to share some of my experiences because I've had some sweet times and crazy times at the drive-in. My first drive-in was early. My brother Paul and his high school sweetheart, Cheryl, would like to go to the drive-in, as all young couples did, because it was the place you could go and make out. But I don't remember if it was my parents or her parents, but they didn't like them going to the drive-in, so they had to take their younger brothers. I'm about 8 years younger, something like that, 7 years younger than Paul. And her brother was similar. He was a couple of years younger than me. So if they wanted to go to the drive-in, they were taking me and Brian with them. And that's my first experience with drive-ins, and I fell in love with it absolutely immediately. Now, they would put us up in the front seat. Brian would usually be behind the driving wheel, and I'd be in the passenger seat, and we'd be talking. We had a great friendship. And then Paul and Cheryl were doing something behind us, but we never really cared to look or anything. All we knew is sometimes we had to clean those windows off because they were getting a little, what is it called when it gets foggy inside, so something was going on. But you know what? That does come from breathing. I'll give them that as well, because I've been in a car and there has been no action, and that still happens. But yeah, we'd be cleaning it off a lot, Eventually we'd bring the Windex and stuff because of that. But anyhow, whatever got me to the drive-in was a good thing. I loved going to the drive-in. They always had back in the past, they used to have weird double bills. And, they'd always show like a comedy, and then they'd have a horror. Now, I love horror movies now, but when I was a kid, I was really freaked out by them. So whenever the horror movie would come on, I'd always say, oh, I don't want to see this, and I'd pretend to sleep. And I'd be listening to everything. I'd have my eyes closed tightly, and I could hear everything. I remember seeing The Omen 3 at the drive-in, and I just was like creeped out by it. And I desperately wanted to fall asleep, but it never happened. I just would be, oh, please fall asleep, but I'd be hearing all the screaming and stuff, and it was just traumatic for me. But I loved it too. I loved hearing the horror, and I think it made me a horror fan later on in life. I remember one time Paul had taken a couple of me and my friends to the drive-in, and He was laying in the back, because Paul liked the drive-in, but not as much as us. Sometimes he was reluctant to take us, but sometimes he just got out of the house. And, my brother was older, he had his own car, so we were going to exploit that. So anyhow, one time he was laying in the back, and he lost his keys. And the keys literally went in between the car seats. We're talking back in the day when cars were built bigger. That's one of the reasons drive-ins went away, was because cars were smaller and not as comfy, where you could sit like three comfortably in the back. Now it wasn't. But anyhow, he lost the keys. We wound up trying to get them. We were using our small hands to get in there, but nothing. We literally had to rip out the whole thing just to get the keys to start the car up. Another time I remember going to see, this is a little bit later, but we went to see Pulp Fiction. And I remember, all I can remember, it was the fall. And it was a cold night in the fall. And I remember having to go pee every 10 minutes. And, you hate that because, it's kind of creepy running to the snack bar, in the middle, you don't know what's going to jump out from on the cars. So I'd always try to hold it, but then I couldn't. So I'd run back and forth, and it was just absolutely crazy. And it reminded me not to drink a lot if I'm going in the early spring or early fall to the drive-in, just because it was just a nightmare. Just try to concentrate on Pulp Fiction and, trying not to have to pee. I used to love, I actually went out, people thought it was crazy, but I always wanted to own a drive-in speaker, and many of you who know me, actually I found one. And people were like, why do you want that thing? These things were big, bulky, old things that if you actually hooked them on the thing, they're big metal boxes, and you just have this tinny sound, This was what we used in the, 60s, 70s, and 80s before, they just hooked it a little thing that it played through your radio. But I loved them. I thought they were great, but you always had to be careful because you'd sometimes I better go to the snack bar now before the lineups get back, after the first movie. And you'd forget it was on there and you'd slam it and this metal thing would be bouncing off your window and you'd just be like, oh shit. I don't know if they must have broken some windows because they were big and bulky. It meant the world to me when I finally owned one. And I show it to people and I have these love in my eyes, but I think only a few people get it. Even my brother was like, why'd you buy one of those? And I'm like, because I love the drive-in. One of my favorite drive-ins I ever went to was me, my brother, and I believe it was a friend of ours, Una. We went to a drive-in. I could be wrong on this. But we went to a drive-in. It was a Cheech and Chong movie, I remember, and it was really getting foggy. And it eventually got to the point where you could not see the screen at all. And what they would do is they'd run it for a little while, and then if it got too foggy, they would just cancel it. But what happened was we eventually couldn't see the movie. We couldn't follow it, so we decided, well, if we ever see it again, it's just going to ruin it. So we basically just turned the radio on and listened to music, sat back and talked. The night wasn't too cold, so the fog was there. But, it was one of my favorite nights. We just talked about stuff and had the music playing in the back. And then when the first movie was done, they said that they would give rain checks to anybody who wanted to. It was a little sad because we eventually did leave, but we decided not to take our time, let the other people clear out, and then we would go, just because we were having a great time still. So we got rain checks and got to go back a couple of nights later to see something different. So, it was a nice, one of my favorite nights. And it didn't even involve watching the movies. I remember another time that I don't even know how I got going to this one, but my brother had a whole bunch of his friends going. This was like the first time I was going to go with a group of his friends. Now, his friends were very rowdy, you know, they were sneaking in booze, they smoked pot, and I was everything opposite to that. But I still remember this day at the drive-in because it was so much fun. I remember just getting to hang with the older guys, and for anybody who's been a younger sibling, you know that's fun sometimes, you know, when you get to be accepted by the guys. And some of the guys, you know, treated me like, you know, dirt, but others were really cool about it. And I just remembered, I can't even remember, I want to say we saw Flash Gordon and something else that night, but it was just an amazing time. And I remember just driving, picking everybody up to go, and I think we had 2 cars. I remember actually sitting on the car, which I believe it was my dad's car at the time, and he would have absolutely flipped if he knew. But we'd literally sit on the hood and lean up against the glass. The cars were so big back then you could do that. And it was just amazing. We'd have the speaker out, or the radio, I can't remember. I think it was still the speaker at the time, so we could have it out. And you can also hear it from all the different cars. And I also remember that night going there because I was introduced to a little song that was infamous at the time. A little song by a group called Rodeo the group was called Showdown, but the song was called the Rodeo Song. Now, for those of you who don't know it, and some of you are probably quickly checking it out on YouTube right now, I'll sing a little bit of it for you. Well, it's 40 below, and I don't give a fuck. Got a heater in my truck, and I'm off to the rodeo. It's Alemany left, Alemany right. Come on, you fucking dummy, get your right step right. Get on stage, you goddamn dude, you know. You piss me off, fucking jerk. Get on my nerves. Okay, that doesn't sound like a brilliant song, but when you're a little kid and you have a whole carload of guys singing this, and I can't believe I actually sang that for you guys, but it was amazing. This is like the height of comedy back then, because you're getting to sing dirty words, and it's like a 2-minute song, and just loved it. I loved being, you know, and they just play it over and over again. It was like, hey, we got the latest cassette, and we'd pop it in and just play it again, and by the end of the night, I was singing along with them, and I loved it. I loved it. Mike and I have gone to the drive-in. We went with a couple of friends, Dave and Heather. It was the only time we've gone to the drive-in, and the weird thing is, and I think I've mentioned this on previous shows, is I'm literally 10 minutes away from a drive-in. I live in the Stony Creek area, and literally you go up the escarpment, there's a drive-in. And Mike and I have only gone once, and I don't know why. I don't know if Mike enjoyed the drive-in experience. We went up to see Scooby-Doo, the original live-action version. So we're going back a bit, you know, kind of right to almost the beginning of our relationship. And we didn't even stay for the second show, but we enjoyed Scooby-Doo. But what happened was, we remember rolling down the windows, and after they played O Canada, which a lot of drive-ins still do that, they started playing Scooby-Doo. And as soon as Scooby-Doo started playing, we just got wafts of the smell of marijuana coming in through the car. And I never smoked marijuana, but I always knew the scent. I actually kind of didn't mind the scent, but it's just something I never got into. But that's another story about my almost getting tempted into trying it. But anyhow, I remember we, you know, it bothered us a little bit, but we just kind of rolled up the windows a bit, and then we kind of, I got the munchies. I don't know. I felt like some Scooby snacks by the end of it. But I don't think that's what kept us. I know Mike's not a big fan of the smell, but I don't think that's what kept us. And we certainly should. So I hadn't been to the drive-in since then. And a couple of years ago, my nephew Jonathan came up for a visit. And one of the first things he said, and I think I've said this in another show, was, "Let's do this. I'm taking you to the drive-in," which it means the world to me. And I think he saw that night my face just light up. Now, he had been to the drive-in with his girlfriend once before, but I talked to him about probably a lot of the times that I'm telling you right now, and I think he really saw my face light up. Now, whenever he does visit, he always takes me to the drive-in, even if there's nothing we really want to see. And I think he's starting to respect that it is the drive-in atmosphere, not just the movies. And I think a lot of people just think it's the movies, but for us older people, it's the nostalgia. And I hope one day he looks back at the drive-in and thinks of me and the good times we had. We've only been a couple times. The first time we went, we got a lot of looks because I'm this older guy and I had this young guy with me. And I could tell we were getting stares. Now, I don't look like his father. I don't look like him at all. We're not technically related. We're kind of. He's the cousin of my nephew and nieces. So in direct terms, I kind of adopted him and he adopted me. So he's my nephew. But anyhow, I remember we got a lot of head stares when we were there. And Jonathan mentioned, yeah, I think we're causing a stir because, I look like some pervert with this young guy. And I kind of worried that it would kind of kill the experience. And I asked Jonathan, are you okay with that, or does this make you feel uncomfortable? And I remember Jonathan just looked at me and said, there is no place I want to be right now than here with you. And nobody's going to change that. We know what our relationship is. I don't give a care. And I always admired that about him, is that he doesn't. We do what we want, and we didn't even let it bother us after that. We just enjoyed the movie and our time together. The following year he came up again, and this time he was really excited because he had his first car. And, I love the car. The car definitely needed a lot of help. That's a nice way of saying it had troubles, and I'm actually surprised he made it all the way from Whitby to my place because it was, it was very rough. But we went to the movies, and we had a great time because we got there early. I've already taught him, you got to go early, you got to get the vibe. And we had some amazing chats before the movie started. And I think he loves that because, we always have amazing chats. But there's something about the drive-in movie chat. It's almost like we can talk about anything here because it's the drive-in. There's almost like an honesty that pours out. And I think that meant a lot to him. But what happened was we kept making jokes that we probably won't be able to start the car when it's all done. And we knew there was going to be trouble about the halfway point because at the intermission he tried to start the car and there was nothing happening. So we hoped it would work itself out. But at the end of the night, we couldn't get the car started, so we went looking for, the management, and they have, back in the day, you'd look for somebody nice with the jumper cables, and they'd help you out. But the drive-ins now pretty much all have those, chargers that you can just use. And, I said, does this happen a lot? And he goes, this happens about 3 times every night. So don't feel bad about it. And I didn't. I'm just glad that, he got home all right because he had a long drive home and apparently the car didn't, stop once. But I was really worried until he gave me that call back. But you know what? Even though the car didn't start and it took us a bit to get it charged, and it was still an amazing time. And I can't, I don't know what it is about me in the drive-in. What makes it even funnier for me is that I don't drive. It's not like something I can just do on my own. I need people to go with me. And, I just love it. Mike, when he met me, knew that I could sit there for hours watching those old intermissions that they used to show at the drive-ins. I've recorded so many on YouTube and played them in between movies to make it a retro feel. If you were in my house, you'd see lots of things like little drive-in things or Coke signs or just popcorn figurines and stuff because I just love drive-ins and the movie-going experience. And of course now, my piece de resistance, I actually have a drive-in speaker. And, you know, I'll always have this nostalgia for it. And I hope that the people I shared them with have a little bit. I know it won't be as much as me, but I do hope they have a little bit. Especially when I get older or I pass on, let's hope that's a long way away. I hope Jonathan thinks of the time he spent with his crazy uncle going to this thing that, it's not really about the movie. It's just the drive-in atmosphere. And you know what? Maybe you should consider going to the drive-in. And, it's become... It used to be a make-out drive-in theater, and now it's back to being a family-oriented thing. So maybe this weekend will be a good time to get everybody together and go and check out a drive-in and see what I'm talking about. Whether you take the family or your best girl or your best guy, whatever the case is. Hey, I'm available. Give me a call. I'll go to the drive-in with anybody. So anyhow, that is my time up. I'm feeling very nostalgic, very good. I love ending on a high like this. I may have to go to the drive-in. I may have to force Mike to go to the drive-in if I don't hear from any of you. Anyhow, my time's up. I will talk to you very, very soon.